Welcome to the Bend Don't Break podcast. We are powered by The Source, Bend's locally owned media company and weekly newspaper. This podcast is our eddy in the rushing waters of local journalism. We are glad that you're taking some of your time to listen to us chat with the people who shape our local community. Support us through our member program at bensource.com.
Thank you to our presenting sponsor, RE/MAX Key Properties, a family-owned full-service real estate brokerage specializing in residential, luxury, commercial, new construction, and ranch and land properties. Their new state-of-the-art facility at 42 Greenwood Avenue is a modern, collaborative space and the new home of the Bend Don't Break podcast recording studio.
I'm Aaron Switzer, publisher of The Source and producer of this fine podcast. Actually co-producer with Megan Burton, who is off camera. And we are here today with Fiona Noonan. She is the Wildlands and Water Program Manager for Central Oregon LandWatch. As Central Oregon LandWatch's Wildlands and Water Program Manager, Fiona works on protecting forests, wildlife habitat, and water in Central Oregon. She seeks to develop public land and water management approaches that meet the needs of both human and wild communities. Fiona is a landscape ecologist. Her interests have taken her all over the West, including stints in Yosemite, Yellowstone, and Leadville, Colorado. After growing up on the west side of Oregon, Fiona chose a home and career in the high desert. Prior to joining Central Oregon LandWatch, she has worked on land protection, climate planning, and natural resource management with Deschutes Land Trust, the Coalition on Oregon Land Trust, and the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. She earned a BS in Earth Systems from Stanford University and an MS in Geosciences from Boise State University. I also am a Boise State grad, so we have that in common. Where her research focused on human-environment interactions, spatial analysis, and wildfire and sagebrush ecosystems. When not at work, Fiona rafts, runs, backcountry skis, bikes, reads, and sews. Classic Bend transplant. That's a native thing right there now. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So Stanford, I'm going to skip to the education part. Let's just start there. So Stanford, not an easy place to get a degree. So what was motivating about going to Stanford for earth sciences? Is Stanford, I know Stanford has a lot of good departments. Is it well known for earth sciences?
They do have a lot of good departments. And historically, geology has been one of them. But as Stanford entered the modern age, they recognized that there was a space for a more interdisciplinary way to think about earth sciences. And so that's what Earth Systems is. It's their version of an environmental science program that focuses on how people and elements of Earth systems function together or don't function together, whatever the case may be. And that was appealing to me as someone who's not strictly a scientist nor strictly interested in the humanities. It brought the two together really nicely.
Where were you before going to Stanford?
I grew up in the Portland area.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you went from Oregon to California, which is not usually the way the water flows.
Now that came back,
And then went to how long was your stint between university and then going back for your master's? Did you go direct? Did you go on and work?
I moved to Bend to work for the Deschutes Land Trust. I was lucky to get an internship there as a starting point. That internship turned into a full-time job, and that kept me here for a couple of years. And as part of that job, I think you mentioned I was focused on climate planning, and that was taking a look at how climate change would impact Central Oregon, what adaptation and mitigation look like in terms of local climate response.
If only they would have listened more to you.
Well, they listened quite a lot, and it gave me the opportunity to think about bigger questions in the climate space and think about what else I might want to learn to add to the ways I might think about its present questions and fire, living here.
Yeah.
It's very top of mind. Today it's top of mind.
Right.
Back then, 7 years ago, it's top of mind. And I decided that it made sense to go back to school to get more skills in spatial analysis and data analysis.
What is spatial analysis?
It's mapping.
Okay.
To a large extent. It's using data that you could display visually
Okay.
to understand spaces
Yeah.
of different kinds. So in my case, it was
Three-dimensional, not just on paper. Because when I
some
read
stuff.
spatial dimensions, well, my brain goes to NASA or something like that.
Oh, sure. Well, they're supplying a lot of our spatial data from space. So that connection is real.
Yeah.
And Boise State has an amazing set of programs, again, focused on human and environment systems, and that included a large focus on fire in kind of arid and semi-arid regions.
It's been a long time since I graduated from Boise State, and I'm not going to age myself on this podcast, but it was not known for having a lot of good master's programs. So I'm encouraged by the fact that I'm sitting with someone who actually believes they do. So and so your geosciences, and then did you have a commitment to come back to Bend? Was this part of your work with the Land Trust, or did you finish up and go and get back?
I finished and thought Boise was an awesome place to be.
Kind of.
We can agree to disagree. I came to love it, and so much of my professional and personal community was here that it made a lot of sense to come back. I have family here as well, and I knew that I had more interests and questions based on the ecosystems that are in Bend and around Bend.
Yeah.
So I decided to at least start by coming back and seeing what was out there.
One of the notes in your bio was about sagebrush fire, which I don't think we got the Aqua Butte, which is probably a lot of sagebrush burning there, but it's not the kind of thing that I would think of in terms of like, oh gosh, I hope you don't have another sagebrush fire. I worry about the forest, right? Why focus on that? And what's the thoughts there?
That's a great question. I think you're right that the emotional resonance around sagebrush fires or grass fires isn't nearly as big as that around forest fires. There are places in forests that everyone has attachments to, you revisit. Probably some people do in the sagebrush steppe as well. But those fires tend to be in very remote parts of Southeast Oregon, Northern Nevada, Southern Idaho, and they happen primarily in the region called the Great Basin. And so Oregon has its southeast corner is the Great Basin, but it extends quite a bit further into a lot more western states, including Utah, parts of Arizona.
Well, the edge is Christmas Rock, right?
It's right around there. Yeah, depending on how you define it. There's an open debate-ish around that.
Yeah, when I see the wave marks at Christmas and Christmas Rock, to me that's the edge of that ocean. And yeah, I mean, you can take it all over the Salt Lake City. They can have the other edge.
I think that's fair. And
I'm sure we're gonna have a bunch of academics calling in and like, well, let me correct you on this one.
yeah. And part of what's interesting though about that space is it is understudied. It doesn't attract the same level of interest by a lot of people.
Yeah.
And sagebrush as an ecosystem type, and there are lots of subtypes, is it's imperiled for a lot of reasons. Fire being potentially among them, as well as invasion of annual grasses. There's all kinds of direct human interference of those systems, just physically removing sagebrush and its friend plants around it.
Yeah.
And because we have so much of it near here and so much of it near Boise, as you know, it made sense to study and to be able to think about things that were locally relevant beyond just the facts, but it's understudied.
What tell me a little bit more about what your job is at Land Trust and why does Land Trust have that position?
At LandWatch,
Land
it's
Watch,
confusing
yeah,
because
no, you're right.
I've done the same thing myself. Be better. And so my role, as you said, is I'm the Wildlands and Water Program Manager, and so that splits, as you can imagine, across wildlands issues, which for us don't focus as much on the sagebrush ecossystems in our area. They focus on the Deschutes and Ochiko National Forest primarily. We think a lot about how we respond, or we do respond rather, to the projects proposed by both national forests, and we're really thinking about ways that we can advocate for balancing wildlife habitat needs with the recreational and resource extraction focus areas of those forests.
Yes.
And to a large extent, the fuel reduction work that those forests are doing. We also work quite a bit on wildlife crossings. You may have heard of the Bend Subtle Lake Wildlife Passage Initiative. that's in there. And then on the water side, we're really focused on advocating for policies that will increase the efficiency of water use in the Deschutes Basin. And so that's looking at how our water is distributed across the basin, upstream of Lake Billy Chinook, who the users are, where the shortfalls are, and how those shortfalls could be addressed in ways that meet the river's needs while also meeting water users' needs.
Why does LandWatch feel as a nonprofit that they want to be at the hub of this? I mean, they cut their teeth on preserving forest land and appropriate development as it expands into forest. But land use has grown, and this is your position, I think, is a good example of that. Why?
Our overall mission is to defend and plan for Central Oregon's livable future. And you're absolutely right that protecting forests has been part of that, and that defending the land use system and defending our rural lands has been part of that. And our view is that you don't have a livable future in Central Oregon without well-functioning forests and without well-functioning water systems, including our rivers, but also the way the water itself is used.
Yeah.
And so, in recognition of that, I think it makes a lot of sense that we've been building out this program over the last couple of years to address those further afield from land use, maybe components of livability, although they're all connected, it turns out.
Yeah. Well, when we were coming in to speak to you today, and Megan and I were planning, like, well, what are we going to talk about in wildfires? Obviously, right? And in our worms and nose today. Hopefully, when this airs, it'll have cleared out. But I mean, talking about you're doing wildfire and water, which are two massive parts of like you said, how we're developing, and also they're hot spots. They're sensitive. Um, let's just talk wildfire at first, and my passion is more in water. So if I cut you off, that's why. No, but since we are burning right now, in the kind of the one of the questions I had is, you talk about the things that the Forest Service is doing and how you're interacting with the Forest Service, but the Forest Service is, I mean, in crisis right now with the cuts that they've got, the lack of staffing. I mean, I can remember how it used to be. They were very vigilant. I don't get the same impression now. What is your impression of working with the Forest Service under the current federal administration?
I think you're correct that the staffing cuts have impacted both the HCO and Deschutes National Forest staffs. I will say that the staff remaining are, um, they're doing their best with limited resources in a lot of ways. We don't always agree with them, but the commitment to making sure that our local forests are open to the public and are being managed to the best of what they think they should be doing is still there. Um, but it does impact decision making when there's a lot of turnover, and it impacts what's possible on the ground when there are a lot of seasonal workers that aren't coming back for their key seasons to do, whether it's trail work or carrying out any number of projects that you may not think about as a recreational user. It makes a difference. I think we're also lucky that the staff we have here have still been open to dialogue with us to a large extent, even as, it's not just staff that are getting cut, it's opportunities for public input, for public process around what the Forest Service is doing. We're doing our best to ensure there are still opportunities for public input here.
Sure.
The landscape is shifting.
Yeah. No doubt, no doubt. What do you consider to be when you wake up in the morning? What is the first thing that comes into Fiona's head about on the fire front? I've got to do what, or I've got to work on what?
So one of the things we're really focused on increasingly at LandWatch is this recognition that you kind of alluded to the Forest Service doing work out in the forest, maybe to reduce fuels. And that's increasingly been a part of what our local forests do when they're talking about management, implementing management on the ground. And in terms of community safety and in terms of our vision for what a livable future looks like, the forest is a piece of it, no doubt. But what we can do closer to home feels much more pressing and much more available in a lot of ways. So we're thinking more and more about how do we advocate for policies around defensible space, around home hardening,
Right.
around preserving the way that our land use system keeps population centers clustered rather than expanding out into the wildland urban interface, which is often one of the most dangerous places for fire ignitions and
Most
fire
Springham has been a great
as an example right now. And so, as much as it would make sense for me to first think of the forests, given my position, what I'm actually thinking
I didn't think it was gonna be the trees.
Yeah.
Can't get your homes, but
What I'm thinking about is where are the places that we collectively can make decisions and
yeah,
prepare for the type of fire season we're having now, which
Yeah.
is, it's kind of hard to think about in the moment while we're facing fires, what could have or should have been done, but we know those fires will be back in the future. So for me,
when I mean, speaking of home hardening and those kind of initiatives, I mean, my sense has been there have been some developers, and I think Sisters has done a great job of getting out in front of home hardening. Um, but you do have pushback. What is your feeling about the road forward with regard to home hardening? Are you seeing a lot of keen developer interest in adding these additional costs to their to their developments in the interface, or do you feel like it's going to be a fight?
well, I won't speak for developers and how they feel. What we have seen though is local interest, both at the city of Bend level and then also at the Deschutes County level, in passing new building code standards that reflect the statewide building code standards for new residential building. And that includes requirements to build with fire resistant materials. So that's the home
Yeah.
hardening sphere, right?
I still remember when I bought my house and we live in that interface. It had the cedar shingle roof, just awesome. Just look at that thing with like 30-year-old dried pieces of wood sitting up there, and
Right.
I feel like most of those are gone now. But
Yeah. Yeah, less common at least. So, I'm aware that there's an anticipated increase in cost
Yeah.
to some extent for those developments. I think our position remains that the smarter long-term way to build is in the most fire resistant, fire safe way. So, we've seen excitement from it at that local policymaking level and from some of our members and supporters who are involved in their own neighborhoods
yeah,
versions of whether it's Firewise or something else, thinking about how they can improve their structure hardening and their defensible space, which is kind of the other side of that
yeah.
sphere of influence you have over your own property or your own neighborhood. And that's been encouraging to hear.
I feel like the city should just hold off on any kind of votes or any propositions around home hardening until like right now, like August, July. Put those things forward. I feel like you're gonna have a way easier community evaluation because when it's in front of you, like, oh, this makes total sense. And then the smoke clears and it clears out of people's memories, and they're like, oh, but I want a more affordable home. Because it does come down to affordable housing and a house it's gonna be a little bit more to the developer. And so I'm saying August, we should-
I support your faith for it.
the other side of this is of your job is the water. And the thing that I find fascinating is that, every year, and I realize that this year was particularly bad for snowpack, but let's set this year aside. Every year there will be a story that comes out, and it'll be in March or at the papers and it's a drought year. We've got a drought year, and those water allocations that are based um, on that snowpack and the amount of water, it it's almost like the drought year is triggered by the over allocation of water. It's triggered by this concept that well, if we didn't get the same amount of rain or snowfall that we got in 1889, well, we're hurting. When that it doesn't feel like that to me. Like some of this has got to be normal. And I don't have stats and figures, but I mean, sure, there's global warming for whatever reason. I think whatever we'll set that aside. But let's just say for sure we could say we're not getting the snowpack we were in 1889, and that's when a lot of these water allocations happened and turn of the century. So you're in your role. You guys are starting to reassess that. Let's say reassess rather than push back on the notion that this allocation is appropriate.
Yes, that is one way to put it. And to your point or your question about drought, we are in a drought and it's long term and it is real. You are right. There is less water. We have less snow that becomes available water later in the season for a variety of reasons. And you are also correct that when allocation in this basin happened, when water was divvied out among all the different, what are now our irrigation districts and other farmers and users, we were over allocated by before World War One.
Right.
Very early in the 20th century, the basin was fully allocated, and that wasn't even taking into account that the river should maybe have water in it sometimes. Luckily, we have.
That's a crazy notion. That's some 2026 notion.
We do in Oregon, in-stream water rights became a concept that was legislated in the 80s, and so we now can legally keep water in stream and give the river itself water rights, but that doesn't fix the whole problem. We still have the system of prior appropriation. First come, first serve. Whoever was here on the land the earliest got claim to that water first. And so what we see is that many of the oldest irrigation districts, the ones that are closer to Bend, in Sisters, that are relying on water from ultimately the Cascades, they get to use the water first, regardless of what they're using it for. They have an allocation that's set every year, in part based on water availability. And as you go down the line of users, you get to the last to arrive, and that right now, or that is the farmers up in Jefferson County in North Unit Irrigation District. And so what you hear about frequently in the context of drought is that those farmers do not receive as much water as they potentially could in theory, even under their water rate. And so, this is a tricky issue. The most productive farmers in our region by many metrics are not necessarily getting the water that they need to continue being productive agricultural producers.
When the issue and these laws are Western wide, I mean, they're the idea of this kind of allocation, and I mean Bend is just a beautiful example of it, right? With their irrigation districts and the older users versus the minority user. But you're fighting, let's not say fighting, you're pushing back on a system that has been instituted Western wide and without a lot of success in freeing up this water. Why now? And why you?
Why now? The problem is not getting better.
Right.
We're seeing farms go out of business. Certain key reaches of our rivers, both the Deschutes and tributaries like the Crooked and Whitechoose Creek, do not have enough water to support functioning fish populations and wildlife populations. And that stress isn't going anywhere. There's no turnaround in sight for the trends.
I don't think it's going to start snowing a lot more in the future.
And, we're not the first to engage with these issues. I hope we won't be the last.
I think there are organizations like yours across the West.
Absolutely. And, I think the timing came together a few years ago at LandWatch to take a run at offering another set of perspectives on advocating on behalf of our rivers. And we're fortunate to be able to have the space and ability to think through what some of the solutions to these really thorny issues might be.
Yeah.
And so we're working locally to understand how things are unfolding on the ground. We're working at the legislative level to think about where might our representatives make changes to this system if we're identifying that it's not working to serve all the different needs, then yeah, we think that's that's something that should change. Yeah, and so we're pushing for ways that will increase efficiency without taking away from what people need to use water for the purposes that they've been using it for. And in particular, we're thinking about, again, the river,
Right.
the people who are using water for farming, and then kind of right sizing water so that, if you're getting more water than you need for a given crop, how might we think about where that additional water might go? How might we think about for these places that have become more urbanized? If those folks don't want all their water or don't want any of their water, what are their options? How can we expand the available water just by moving it around, not by anticipating some kind of increase in overall water?
Well, the irrigation districts have had some, we'll call it success, although it's over the dead bodies of the irrigation users to pipe those canals. So there is somewhat of I think, a precedent set to go in and hardscape and change the way that water is being used in that environment. But of course, all that's litigated every time they put one of those straws in the ground. So it's a long road.
It is a long road, and you're absolutely right that the irrigation districts have been working toward piping, and in some cases are fully piped, like up in Three Sisters Irrigation
Yeah.
District. And we absolutely support those piping efforts. They're tremendous. They also are tremendously costly and take a very long time. And so while that's happening, we're thinking about, well, what else is there to do? And that's not just these policies that I've been talking about, but also on the smaller level, we have everyone can think of a canal they've seen with water running through it, whether it's near Reed Market or 97 or up on the north side of town or elsewhere. Those are the big ones that we're talking about.
Yeah, I still can't believe COIC has that one that wants right down Reed.
Right.
And it's open.
You're right. But what you don't see or know as much about generally is what we call private laterals. And these are all of the little teeny tiny canals that feed off of the big ones. That's how you get water to a farm. And all of those also could be piped. And so that's another example of ways we're thinking about how do we move this forward a little quicker.
My understanding is that it's the people at the very end of the line, the people who have dug their own little ditches and have flooded and put, move if you go to the original mapping of those irrigation districts, they've got little tributaries that go over to this part, little tributaries, and then you see a massive amount of waste at the end. And where, it's easy to focus on, like I said, the obvious thing is when you're going down Reed Market and you look over to the right and there's this raging river and it's not in a river. It's in the, but I do know that so much of that is out in the hinterlands that you're never going to see. It's on private property. You're not going to, unless you've happened to stumble into your ankle deep wetland that's been created out there.
Yeah, it's a real mix. It is both. Yeah, right. It's what happens at the end. It's what happens along the way. It's how the water is used, and all of it is kind of a very thorny set of problems to untangle. And it isn't any one entity's fault or one entity's design. In fact, some of it is, like you just mentioned, it's kind of unknown. We don't know exactly where every little
I think
piece of it is.
Yeah, I think that's what's most difficult is that in a lot of cases, like work that's been done to protect Badlands Wilderness or something, you can look at the parcel and the entity that has that parcel. Is it the BLM? Well, we'll work with the BLM on how to do this. But with water, it's here one minute, it's gone, it's down here. This person's connected to this person. Where are you going to where do you push back at? You push back a little on your irrigators, politicians. I don't envy you. So a lot of people you got to talk to.
It is a lot of people, and I think you're right that it is a lot of these individual end users, and that's complicated, and everyone has a different starting point on their views. And the fact that we have these irrigation districts as more or less the representative of each of these users in the different districts, in some ways gives a clearer point to focus on. It's not the only point, and there are a lot of different voices and opinions in your room, and a lot of considerations that are outside of this direct canal system, including tribal treaty rights and what happens much further down in the system, and all kinds of things. But you're correct. There's no there's no clear single pathway forward, and so we're navigating what we think is a logical pathway right now.
What is so again, I'll put it to you. You wake up in the morning. What's the number one thing you're thinking about in terms of your water work?
I'm thinking a lot about how do we be more logical in this system? How do we match what people need to what they get? How do we change the system to make that happen? And it's possible. There is precedent in some irrigation districts. And I think that there are a lot of ways to get there, whether it's through a water bank, which the legislature recently passed a Deschutes water bank bill. So it exists and now it needs to be filled. And whether there are other opportunities for making this system more logical, more efficient, reducing waste. I think, time and again, I hear from people in all parts of life in Bend that people can feel that there is water wasted in these various ways, even if they don't know all the mechanics of it or exactly why it's happening. This feeling that we could do better, I think, has felt pretty prominent. And so, that's what we're thinking about is where do you stretch, make inroads on reducing waste in a way that keeps everyone, including the river, whole?
Yeah. Well, we are unfortunately at the end of our time, and I knew it because you got fire and water. So it's kind of like separate podcasts, so we merged it. But anything that you want to say to listeners or readers that we might not have touched on, or I know there's an ocean of them, and I'll burn fire out.
A river and a reservoir of them. I think it is such an interesting and tricky problem to be thinking both about wildfire and about water. And what I mentioned earlier, that there are these kind of overlapping and intersecting facets of livability in Central Oregon, is really core to what we're doing at LandWatch. And I think we're trying to think through these things not as separate issues, but really all together. Our cities and towns are not separate from the way we think about wildfire preparedness, and our farms and forests are integrally connected to the way we think about water distribution, and kind of keeping the whole picture in mind is, I think, what we're trying to do and what we hope others get excited about with us as well.
Well, thank you for coming in and sharing. And again, the list of people you have to talk to on a daily basis when I think about the issues is mind-numbing to me.
Well, it's a fun challenge. Thank you for having me.
I loved it. This has been the Bend Don't Break podcast. If you like what you heard, go to bendsource.com, become a member, support us. Then you can head over to LandWatch and you can support them. And then you can just keep the trend going. Thank you for spending some time with me. I know you can put your ears in many different places, and we appreciate you listening. Fiona, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to the Bend Don't Break podcast, powered by The Source Weekly. To read, hear, and see more of what we do, go to bendsource.com.